everyone, it's Shelby here. Welcome back to A Little Literary Love. I'm glad you are with me today. Today's video is going to be my end of July wrap up. So I'll be talking about all the books that I read in the end half of July. But before we get into talking about all of those books, I do just wanted to remind you all that if you are enjoying my content, please subscribe. It definitely helps a small YouTuber out. So we're gonna get into these books. I had a much slower reading month in July. If you watched my first wrap-up video for July talking about the books that I read in the first half of the month, I only read like 6 books. I'm looking at my list right now. Yeah, I read 6 books. This is slightly under what I typically read for half of a month, and then we're even under a little bit more for the second half of July. I read 5 books. I did get in one arc, and then at the end of the video, we'll kind of go over where I'm at with my goals for the month. So starting off, second half of July, I read God of Malice by Rena Kent. This is the first book in her Legacy of God series. So this is a dark romance series of books that are technically, I believe, all standalones, but they all take place in the same world with like this friend group. I've also been told that it's better to read some of Rena Kent's prior series before this one, because this one has the main characters of this one are the children of her like all of her prior series leading up to this one. So this is about our female main character. She is grieving the loss of a friend of hers who had committed suicide. So she sneaks out in the middle of the night and goes to this cliff that he fell off of. And she goes there. She's very depressed, and she accidentally like almost falls off herself and then gets rescued sort of by our male main character of this story. But he is a like legit textbook psychopath. And he decides that he's just, instead of actually saving her, he's gonna like let her go and let her fall off. Except she says, I'll do anything if you save me. So then he rescues her and then immediately makes her suck him. So then they end up going to like, they don't go to the same like university school, and this all takes place I think in England. They go to rival ones, but they're like right next to each other, and he has become like obsessed with her now. He is very fascinated by her and just wants to learn more about her, and it ends up developing into their romance. So I gave this one 3 stars. I know there are some Rena Kent like absolute stans. Like, people go nuts for Rena Kent. And this is like the 3rd or 4th book by Rena Kent that I have read. I read one other series from her, and I just don't know that Rena Kent is an author for me. She has really great like plot and stories. Like, they're just, the whole plot of this was like absolutely bonkers. It almost felt like I was watching like a train wreck. Like, I couldn't put this book down. I had to know what happened next. But then at the end of the book, when I finished it, it left me feeling like, why did I waste my time reading this? This was not a good romance. I didn't care for like the psychopath part. Yes, while I thought that was interesting, and there is a lot of like dark elements to it. Like, there is definitely dubious consent and non-consent in here, which if done right, I can read that. That's not a problem for me. But this one, it felt meh. And I didn't really find the love story very believable. And I just, the end of it was resolved way too quickly with what else was like going on in the story, and I just didn't really care for it. And I've heard most of the rest of the books in this series are along the same lines and very similar. So I don't know that I will be continuing on and reading any more Rena Kent books. I might. I've thought about, she has one male romance that is in this series, and I've thought about just skipping to that one because I've heard that that one is like her best book. So I might try that one, but otherwise I think Rena Kent is just a no author for me. Then I read Pheromone by C.M. Stunich. This is the first book in her For the Love of Aliens trilogy. And C.M. Stunich is one of those authors that I read a ton of her books. Like, she has a huge backlist. I read a bunch of them before, like when I was first getting into reading romance, and then I kind of got away from her, mostly because she has a lot of stories. Like, she writes a lot of White Shoes books, so if you like those, she's a great author to go to. But she has a lot of bully romances and a lot of romances that take place either in high school, and I've just kind of like, as I've gotten older, I've kind of gotten away from that genre and those settings. But here we have this one. This is a sci-fi alien romance story. Our female main character is working a party for her friend. She's like a caterer, and her friend and several other people that are at this party get abducted by aliens. She does not realize this at first because she just kind of like wakes up somewhere and she sees this really weird sign about humans are either meat, pets, or I can't remember what the other one is, but basically like a sex slave. And she's in this tent and they are all getting sold off to these various aliens that are coming in. One guy gets eaten. And then she gets sold off and is going with this person that she doesn't really trust. And then she tries to get away and she lands into the hands of this. He's described as like a dragon like alien creature. And he takes her back to his lair, which happens to be this really old spaceship, not of human nature but from other alien species. And then they have this big like language barrier, and she is trying to just figure out how she can communicate with him and use him, like, because he is in a sense also protecting her. So she's trying to survive in this weird alien planet, but then she's also wanting to get back to the town where they were at so she can get a hold of her friend again in hopes of potentially going back home to Earth. So it's a lot of stuff is going on in this first one. This one is mostly just kind of like setting the scene of what's happening and building the plot. This one I gave 4 stars. I really liked the world of this one and C.M. Stunich like world building, because it doesn't feel like there's not a ton of like info dumping that's given to us. All the different elements of where they're at, and how our heroine is learning things is presented very well. I did get very frustrated. The only things that I didn't like about this book is the main female character that we're mostly reading the story from her point of view. She just is very unlikable. Like, she annoyed me for most of the book. So I want to continue reading because I really like the plot and the world, and I'm very interested in her love interest, because this does become a White Shoes romance. So I'm very interested to see how that happens. I find all of the different love interests, their characters, I feel like all of them are very unique. So I enjoyed that aspect. The main character just really annoyed me. So I probably will push through at some point and continue on with this series because it was very enjoyable. It was just her that really annoyed me. Steam on that is high too. And I don't think I mentioned Steam on God of Malice. God of Malice Steam was also very high. Then I read Booted by Pam Godwin. This is the last book of her Trails of Sin trilogy. And this is kind of wrapping up the storyline. So like in the first book, if you haven't watched some of my wrap-ups where I was talking about the rest of the series, the first book, it's about these two families, and they are very close friends. There's one girl, and she is dating the other family's, like, one of the guys. Um, and when they were teenagers, she gets brutally raped, and they all are forced to watch this. So this is about Lauren. This is her older brother. In the first book, he went after one of her rapists and tried to kill them. So then he landed in jail because he did kill one person. So now Lauren is out of jail, and he is coming back home. And then he gets home only to find this woman in his bed. So this is also about Raina. She's our female main character of the story. She was dating, and I use that term very loosely. She was dating the friends, like the other guys in this group, father. But then you realize, like, she has escaped him because he has brutally raped her and tortured her and kept her locked up, and she has escaped him, and she's seeking refuge there. And then you find more out about why she was with him, that he was blackmailing her, and a lot of other things going on with that. So they kind of strike this unconventional bond because of their, like, past traumas, because he's also got a lot of trauma with killing that person, but then also being in prison for many years now. I think it's been like almost 10 years that he's been in prison. So there's a lot of trauma that is going to incur from that type of living environment. So they have this, like, bond, and she decides that she is going to kill their friend's dad that was being so abusive towards her, and he decides that he's going to help her with this endeavor. So and you find out more about him, that he was actually behind this ploy to kill their mothers, and he was trying to take over their ranch that they own, and a lot of other different things are happening. But I really enjoyed this one. I give this one 4 stars. This one might be my favorite of the series. I felt like it was a really good conclusion of the series. I really liked their bond together and their chemistry that they had. And I just thought it was very sweet and sexy in this, like, really dark environment, if that makes sense. And then we move on to the arc that I read. That's going to be A Dance Macabre by Naomi Loud. This is going to be the first book of a new series from her, the Perverse City series. So this is a very unique story. This has magical realism. And it is dark. It is a gothic romance. And this is about our two main characters that end up falling in love and being the main aspect of this love story. They are descendants through these, like, family lines of this city. Excuse me. There are 6 families, I believe, 6 ruling families, and they all, like, rotate every so many years. I think it's like 19 years. They all get rotated into one person becomes the sole, like, ruler, but they all come from these different families. And then the different families still have a good amount of, like, power over the citizens of this city. So it is time to choose the next ruler, but this is chosen through their gods that they all worship. And the gods have chosen Wolfgang to be the leader. However, Mercy is his, like, arch nemesis. They hate each other, and she decides that she wants to be ruler. So in order to become ruler after the gods choose you, they have to kill somebody from the prior ruling family. And so before he's able to kill that person, she takes the kill instead. And then the gods decide that they must co-rule together. And they both hate this idea because, like I said, they hate each other with a burning passion, but the gods decreed it, so they're going to do it because they don't want to anger their gods. They move into the ruler's home and to try to co-rule together, but they realize that they also have this intense lustful attraction towards one another, and with them being in proximity to one another, they're having to learn more about each other, and they realize that they have a lot of the same quirks, and they like a lot of the same things. So then, of course, then it becomes like the romance. So I gave this one 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was very unique. It did take a bit to get into. I felt like the first like 50 pages or so, like it was very confusing, and I didn't quite understand the world. But once you get into it and you understand a little bit more, then I really started to get into it. This for sure gave me Gomez and Morticia Addams vibes, if you've ever watched like the Addams Family, but like before they're married and they have kids, like if they were to be dating before that, but they like hated each other. And then it comes to where, you know, how like Morticia and Gomez Addams are just absolutely in love with each other, and they can't stop touching each other, and they're just so passionate with one another. That's where it gets to that point. Both of these characters are obviously very morally black. They kill people, they worship these gods. Wolfgang is very self centered and arrogant and thinks the world of himself. And then Mercy, her god, is specifically the god of death. So she has these like callings from her god to go kill people. They all torture people. So there's lots of violence and gore in this one. It is, like I said, it is a very dark romance. But I thought this was just very unique, and I really enjoyed this one. This is my first Naomi Loud book, and I do want to try to read more books from her, and I definitely will be continuing the series when she puts more books out in the series. It was very good. And then the last book that I read for July is going to be Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. This is a historical romance. This is a beloved book in the romance community, especially for the historical romance readers. This takes place in like, I can't remember if this is around the Civil War, pre-Civil War, or a little bit after, but both of our characters help the Underground Railroad. Hester is living in Michigan, and she is a conductor along the Underground Railroad, helping to free slaves, and she gets asked to help give refuge to a fellow conductor along the railroad, but he is a very notorious conductor. He is known as the Black Daniel, but he has been seriously wounded. So she hides him in her cellar and nurses him back to health. And then he wakes up and finds her absolutely fascinating. You learn that he is actually a son from a very prominent and wealthy free Black family in New Orleans. And he has decided that he doesn't care about his wealth, and he wants to help free slaves. So he becomes obsessed with Esther and wants to make her his wife and wants to be with her forever. But she's very wary about doing this, and because she feels that love is a weakness, and she just doesn't want anything to do with love. So it's him trying to wear her down to be his wife. So I give this one 4 stars. I definitely understand why this is such a beloved book of the community. It's a very wonderful book. It had a lot of poignant moments in it and emotional moments. I also really liked Beverly Jenkins' writing with how much historical facts were dispersed throughout this book, but without feeling like it was like info dumping on you. They were just very well woven into the story. My only thing was I felt like the plot at times was kind of didn't really have a good direction to it. We were just kind of following along with Hester and Galen, and it just didn't really have like it didn't really seem like there was much of a purpose to it. I also didn't really care for one of the things that Galen does to try to get Hester to marry him. It didn't really set that well with me, but overall, I did really enjoy this story. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars, and I feel like it is a very important book within romance as a whole, but also for Black authors. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. But yeah, so that is going to be all of the books that I read for July. So my goals for the month, I did not meet any of my goals for the month of July, and that makes me really sad, and but also very determined and motivated to do better for August in getting my goals. So, my first goal is to read 1 nonfiction. I did not meet that goal, but I am currently reading a nonfiction book now that we're in August. So, I should be able to get that done for August. I also had a goal to read 2 physical books, did not read that whatsoever. And then my third goal is to read 3 diverse books. I got very close to that, but I did not actually complete that goal. So I read Going Down Smooth. That is by Drea Wells. So that was in my first wrap up for July. That is a Black author about Black characters, but it's an Omegaverse story. So I read that one. And then the other one I read was the one that I just talked about, Indigo by Beverly Jenkins. Otherwise, yeah. So I definitely failed on my goals. Very sad, but that just prompts me to try to do better for the upcoming months. But that is going to be it for this wrap up. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a thumbs up button and comment down below with some of the books that you read in July. What were some of your favorites? And then, like I said at the beginning of this video, make sure to subscribe if you like my content. I really appreciate it. But otherwise, I will see you all in the next one. Bye, guys.